Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 11 of my existing Jay saying stuff during lockdown, and episode 1 of the Value Exchange podcast behind the scenes. Hopefully you enjoyed my little Russian doll game there with some of my daughter's toys. Anyway, without further ado, yes, welcome and thank you for tuning in to this, my first episode of my new content inside of my existing content now that I have built a bit of traction behind me. And yes, this is going to be now a space where I talk about what has inspired me and what is going on behind the scenes in the development and creation of this Values Exchange podcast, which I'm really looking forward to creating and putting out there for not only for myself, again turning up for myself, but for you and for everybody who is watching these videos. Now, I'm going to be trying to be punchy and answer 4 quick questions that I put down to kind of just, I suppose, set an opening context as to like what's going on here. And that first question for me is, of all the conversations to have, why this one? And I mean, it is a very salient question for when you're starting creating new content or making a new channel, because in many ways it becomes your new business. And does the world need another business? Does it need your business? And now I hope that with what I am intending to do with the Values Exchange, it is something that the world does need, because I am hoping to have conversations with people that rise above the superfluous and above a lot of what I can only now characterize as manufactured culture war stuff. Because I don't really see how a number of the things that have been happening in the public domain are serving anybody but the imperial elites who kind of happily like march on with their wars and divisions around the world, while so many of us are fighting over which YouTuber said this, or did this person deserve to win this Grammy. And I mean, in the scheme of things, none of these things matter. But what does matter is our independent and our individual freedoms, which has slowly been eradicated, and also our sovereignty. And that means that sovereignty is of our food, of our environment, and as I've mentioned in previous weeks, for ourselves. And so for me, the reason why I felt a conversation around values was the most important and the best thing that I could do was because in any conversation that I have with people, what I recognize, what bonds me to people, what draws me to them, and what helps me find the people who ultimately are my tribe is the core values that we share. Question 2 is, what core values are we talking about? So to give an example, for me, community is one of those core values. And I don't mean community in the sense of the people who just happen to live by you in your local geography, but I mean a community of intent and of meaning. And that community can be a global community of people who share your ideas and share your thoughts. But I think one of the key constituents of community, and something that matters to me, is turning up for people in your community, showing up for them, letting them know that if they fall, that you're there to catch them, and then expecting the same from them too. Because I think if there has been one, or the biggest effect, the cancer of capitalism is the drive towards individualism, and people slowly, in the scheme of things, slowly forgetting what it is to be a citizen, forgetting what community really means, and really reveling in this idea of pettiness, individualism, and being able to demark what is mine separate to what is yours. And I think this ownership model is something that's going to have to come to an end anyway. And a lot of modern economists and others would say that this new generation, the Generation Z and beyond, they see beyond the ownership model anyway. And look at the biggest companies, your Airbnbs, Uber, etc. They're all based on you don't need to own the house, you don't need to own the car. In essence, what you need is shelter, what you need is transport. You don't need to own the means of those things, you just need the resource. And I think that although that they've applied it very much to a business model, I think that is very much how we should be looking at our values, not the things that we have dressed up and put on top of them, but at their core, what are the things that we need, the things that actually bond us and bring us together. And so for me, community, just kind of coming back to that, matters to me, because I just expect, in my own life at least, I expect that the people that I show up for, that they show up for me, and bit by bit, that is how we can evolve. That's a physical evolution, a mental evolution, a spiritual evolution. And so community is something that will always matter to me, and all of the work and projects that I do ultimately lead back to how I can bring people together, whether that has been a bar owner, 20 years ago, through all of the different social impact projects and different things that I've been involved in, storytelling at a dating app. Always, if I was to look back at what has been the singular thread that binds together all of these eclectic things that I've done through my career, is ultimately about bringing people together. And so that is a value that stands out to me and matters so much. So my objective with this podcast, third question, is really to help other people remember the values that matter to them and hopefully bring them back to the forefront. Because as I just said before, I think that in the current climate of information overload, which we get through all of these different platforms we're now subscribed to, it's quite easy to lose ourselves. And the thing is as well that we now have a society that actually, it revels in us losing ourselves. It wants us to get lost in content, lost in entertainment, lost in dating, lost in so many different things. But now that feeling of loss is actually a vacuum that the attention economy and these media companies are trying to vacuum up. They don't see it as a bad thing for you. They see it as an opportunity for them. And so for me, I just really want to be able to remind people that our life is more than discussing what we're watching on Netflix and who we're subscribed to for different services. I think we need to remember what it is that intrinsically bonds us together as people, and bit by bit that will hopefully drive us back towards an idea of citizenry and citizenship as opposed to consumerism and individualism only. And so my last question that I'm going to answer for today is, how can this concept be of transferable value? Now, I think that maybe it was intimated in what I was saying, but definitely what I believe is that conversations around values ultimately talk to what is core inside of us. And as any personal trainer or even any business trainer will tell you, ultimately, you do all these fancy exercises and stuff, but the key muscle, the thing that we need to work on most always, is your core. Once your core is strong, everything else can be added on top of it. And so similarly here, I think that our values, once that we kind of can extrapolate what our core values are, and then we can build on those bit by bit, so much of the epidermic stuff which is now filling our lives can actually be all cleared off of that proverbial shelf. And we can actually begin to remember, even in amongst all of the culture wars and the identity politics, that there are some key things that actually bond us together underneath that all. And family and community, I will never fail to believe, is paramount amongst that. So these are some kind of ideas for now. As I start putting together the format, the production for this show. But again, just to be totally upfront and honest about it, I've actually already recorded 3 or 4 conversations in this series, and they've already been so life affirming, so thought provoking, from the different characters who I've had conversations with about their values. And it's actually really helped bond me more to them and them to me, because ultimately, once you dive into the conversation and realize that some of the things that make us who we are, they go all the way back to our childhood, they go all the way back to epiphanies that we've had during our lives. And funnily enough, for a lot of us, those epiphanies or those moments that we had are things that we had alone. Ultimately, epiphanies are things you have alone. It is a personal awakening that brings you to another level. But I think that for a lot of people, they don't get to share the afterglow, the aftermath of those epiphanies with enough people. And in a way, I think sometimes it allows for some people's epiphanies to not last as long as they could, by not getting the hooks in with other people who then help level them out or help benchmark with those. So for me, I believe that the transferable benefit of this podcast is that for everybody who has the conversation with me and I with them, and even people who engage with what we're doing passively, will be able to benchmark values that they can bring into their own lives, that we can all bring into our own lives, which will hopefully make for a better living situation, a better environment, and just a better outlook for all of us. So I'm going to round it off there for this week, but I don't want to break from my habit of a quote of the week. And I think a very apt quote for this week, funnily enough, a quote that I learned in my bar days from the head barman at Diageo, who went around the world training. But it's the quote that they use for selling Johnny Walker. Can't believe that I'm doing a commercial like little bit like that. But ultimately, a great quote, and that is that the journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. And I think it's just a reminder to me as well that there is so much that I want to do with this audiovisual podcast, with these conversations, with the work that I'm going to be doing with I Am Sound and with Seeds. But ultimately, it all begins with the first step. And that first step is the idea of core value and what value it is that I can bring to first myself, to these conversations, and ultimately to the world. So thank you again for tuning in for another week. As I said, it is very exciting now knowing exactly what it is that I want to do with the content, where I'm looking to go with it. And so, yeah, like, watch this space. I will continue to pull the bits and pieces of it together. I'll continue to muse ideas as to how to make it stronger and better here. And I look forward to any feedback from anybody. So, yeah, once again, thank you for tuning in, and goodbye from me, from Violet, and this week even from Emerald here behind us as well. Thank you. Look forward to seeing you in the next one. Ciao for now.